bit about both of our speakers today, although I assume you know quite a bit about them already. And then after I've introduced, and I'm going to introduce both of them alphabetically, and then they each will speak for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then we will have some questions and answers. And I will probably lead off with some political science kinds of questions, which I hope is okay, and I hope that opens up the discussion in certain ways. So let me go ahead and introduce these two esteemed individuals. Jesse Arreguin is a member of the Berkeley City Council. He represents District 4, and he was the first Latino and the youngest member to serve the city of Berkeley as a council member. He's done a variety of things, including being an undergraduate here at UC Berkeley and playing some very important roles in terms of student governance here. And during his years, he has been involved in the adoption of some very significant legislation in the city of Berkeley, including issues with regard to affordable housing and other ways in terms of addressing concerns that are of particular concern to communities of color. As he's now running for mayor, which is quite impressive, of course, he has an agenda that identifies certain concerns such as health disparities, housing, housing finance, and educational opportunities, which he will hopefully pursue when he becomes mayor, not if, but when, I guess. Okay, let's put it that way. So again, we're very pleased to have him here. Our other representative, who I've had the good fortune to talk to a little bit before our meeting today here, is Beatriz Leyva Cutler. She's a member of the Berkeley School Board, and she's from the Bay Area as well. I mean, it's interesting, the two individuals are from the area. They didn't go far physically, but they've gone really far in other kinds of ways, which is very striking and admirable. She attended San Francisco State University, where she received a Bachelor of Arts degree in La Raza Studies, and she has a master's degree from Pacific Coast College. As noted in her biography, and it's hard to keep track of all these things that she's done, as I was telling her beforehand. She's served co-chair of the Chicana Latina Foundation, a member of the National Association for Young Children, Alameda Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, alumni of Leader Spring, and she's been honored as Berkeley's Outstanding Woman, as well as other kinds of work with regard to child care and so on, which was a precursor to her involvement in education issues. And she's currently running for re-election to the Berkeley School Board, and she had mentioned that she might not seek another term after that. And I guess I'd like you to reconsider. So with that, let me go ahead and have Jesse go first, again, speak for a few minutes, and then we'll have Beatriz speak for a few minutes, and then we will have questions, answers, and discussion. Okay.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this discussion and to talk a little bit about the issues facing Latinos in Berkeley and some opportunities to address those issues. I first want to talk a little bit about some of the challenges facing Berkeley's Latino community and what some solutions are and things that I would like to see adopted by the city of Berkeley. And I think it's worth noting, and I'm sure Beatriz will talk more about this in her presentation, a lot of this involves both the city and the school district, and ensuring and continuing a strong relationship between the city and the school district. We make up 11% in growing of Berkeley's population. Actually, one of the fastest demographic groups according to the 2010 census. But yet there are some critical challenges. We have major disparities in the Berkeley community on the basis of race and economic opportunity. And Latinos and African Americans face some very critical challenges in health and housing opportunity and educational opportunity. Just to put things in perspective, went back and looked at some statistics. In 2012, I guess this was based on the 2010 census, 40% of Berkeley's Latinos live in households whose incomes are less than $35,000 a year. and 75% of the city's white Caucasian population own homes, whereas 5% of Latinos have access to homeownership. So there is a major disparity, not only in terms of wages, but also in terms of access to homeownership. So not surprisingly, there's a large percentage of Latinos that are renters. Berkeley faces some of the highest housing costs in the entire Bay Area. The median home price is over $1.1 million, and the median rent in Berkeley is, depending on if you're looking at older housing versus newer housing, is anywhere between $2,000 to $3,500 a month. So for families making less than $35,000 a year, that's a significant challenge to maintain housing security. One way that Berkeley can address this is through our minimum wage. And I was proud to be part of a city council that adopted a municipal minimum wage in 2014, which now is at $12.43, and will be going up to $15 an hour by the year 2018. I am committed to ensuring that that minimum wage goes beyond $15 an hour, because as we all know, you cannot support your family in Berkeley, let alone the Bay Area, on $15 an hour. And so, one of the initiatives I want to see as mayor, and whether or not I'm elected mayor, I still will be serving on our city council, so I'm still committed to addressing this issue, is looking at how we can move the minimum wage further towards a living wage, and having conversations with the business community, with organized labor, with other stakeholders about how we can create a pathway to a living wage. With rising housing costs, increasing wages is a critical step to ensuring economic justice and in maintaining our diversity. We are losing our economic and cultural diversity in Berkeley due to our housing crisis. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that I hear from residents in the Berkeley community are the major demographic changes happening in the Berkeley community. As an example, our African American population in 1970 was at 20%. We're now down to 8%. So we are seeing an exodus of communities of color and working families from Berkeley due to rising housing costs. And the central question really is, will we move forward as a community in a way that's equitable and that maintains the economic and cultural diversity of our city? We can grow, we can change when we do it in a way that maintains the amazing diversity, the people, the fabric that makes Berkeley such an incredible community. And not surprisingly, 20% of Berkeley Latino children live in poverty, and this is 4 times the rate among white children. And so there's also disparity in terms of child poverty amongst African Americans and Latinos as well. In addition, there are major disparities on the basis of health in the Berkeley community. Just going back, first of all, to income, 1 of every 5 Latino children in Berkeley lives in poverty, and for every dollar earned by white residents, African Americans and Latinos earn 40 cents on the dollar. And these are statistics from our 2013 health status report. I'm sure the disparity continues to this day. And so in terms of health access, there are some major disparities on the basis of race. The asthma hospitalization rates are much higher for African Americans and Latino children in the Berkeley community. The rate of childhood obesity is higher as well. And these disparities not only exist along racial lines, but also geographic lines. We definitely see greater disparities on the basis of health in South and West Berkeley compared to other more affluent parts of our city. We really have 2 Berkeleys. We have a very prosperous city, but that prosperity is not shared by everyone in our community. And so, a number of years ago, on the basis of the health status report, Berkeley really began to look at how we can begin to address these very systemic inequities on the basis of health. And one of the things that Berkeley did, there are a number of people who deserve recognition, including Beatriz. It was a real community effort. We were the first city in the state of California and the country to pass a soda tax. And as a result of that tax, we have generated over $1.2 million a year in funding that can go to, that not only go to our cooking and gardening programs in our Berkeley schools, but programs to educate youth about the negative effects of sweetened beverages and efforts to reduce childhood obesity and improve community health. And so that is, once again, a Berkeley first. Berkeley has historically been a leader on many initiatives, and this is one way in which Berkeley is continuing to lead the way. And certainly an additional 1.2 million helps, but there's certainly more that we need to do to continue to address the major inequities on the basis of race in our health outcomes. We also have seen disproportionality in terms of policing. Last year, as a result of our racial profiling policy, which I actually helped author and bring to the City Council, we finally got statistics broken down by race on police stops. And there was a greater proportion of Black and Latino people in our community that have been stopped by our police. It was 56% for Latinos and 66% for African Americans, compared to 38% of whites. And so there is a disproportionality, certainly in terms of people of color being stopped by Berkeley police. And many people probably don't think that, you know, this kind of this disproportionality in terms of policing exists in Berkeley, since we're such a liberal, progressive city, but it does exist. And so we have moved forward with implementing implicit bias training for all of our police. But we really got to dig down and really find out what is going on in our department and work to ensure that this trend does not continue, so that we don't have such a disproportionate, and I would argue discriminatory, pattern of policing in the Berkeley community. Berkeley has led the way in terms of fighting for just immigrant policies. On the City Council, I have put forward a number of policies that have gotten adopted to promote just immigration practice in Berkeley. In 2007, before I was on the council, Berkeley became a sanctuary city. One of the first things I did when I was elected to the council was I worked with our chief of police, our former chief of police, to end the towing of cars of undocumented drivers in the city of Berkeley. We also worked to ensure that Berkeley became the first city not to hold undocumented people in our jails for ICE to take custody. And this was before the Trust Act and for the other efforts on the state level. Obviously, you know, changing our immigration policies really lies on the national level, but I think Berkeley and other communities in the Bay Area, through adopting just policies, can build momentum to see the kinds of reforms that we're seeing on the statewide level. Certainly the efforts of Berkeley and Oakland and other communities to adopt sanctuary policies, like San Francisco, helped build momentum for some of the statewide policies that we've seen adopted by the legislature and Governor Brown. So, you know, the issues of poverty and economic opportunity, the issues of health access and health outcomes, housing, making sure that, you know, we can increase affordable housing for everyone in our community. You know, it isn't just affecting low-income populations now, it's affecting our middle income. Our teachers, our librarians, people that have been long considered the middle class are struggling to afford rising housing costs in the city of Berkeley. How we can continue to implement just policing policies and a real community policing focus. These are all areas where I think there's we have made progress, but there's work that continues to be done. And that's why it's so essential that we have Latinos in positions of leadership in the city of Berkeley. I'm happy to say, you know, I think it was, ever since we were elected the same year in 2008, we now have 4 Latinos in elected office in the city of Berkeley. And that's, I think, before we were both elected, there was not a single Latino in the city council, and there might have been one or 2 Latinos on the school board over the years, but we now have a greater proportion of elected offices in the city of Berkeley than we had before. But that is not reflected in the department heads in City Hall, or people that serve on the policy committees that shape city policy. And so while we do represent 11% of the city's population, our community is still underrepresented in governance, and certainly is overrepresented in impoverishment of our community. And so 5% of the members of our city boards and commissions are Latino. And so, at least 11% should be a benchmark we're trying to see. If we are 11% of the population, we should have 11% of the seats on Berkeley's boards and commissions. These are positions that make really important decisions on, what gets built where. Will we increase affordable housing? Our policing policies, transportation. And so having, people from the Latino community sitting in these positions helps ensure that what Berkeley does ultimately helps improve the well-being of our community and addresses these challenges that we talked about. So I am committed, as I have been in my 8 years in office, to continuing to ensure that that our city government reflects the diversity of our city. And that in the elected and appointed positions of the city of Berkeley that we have Latinos, African Americans, Asian Americans, students, people that really truly represent the diversity of our community. And so that the voice of our community is heard, that we're empowered, that we have a seat at the table. But what's also critical is voter registration and voter turnout. This is a historic election, not just nationally, but locally. We have the opportunity to not only elect the first Latino mayor in Berkeley history, and I think in all of Alameda County, but to elect important offices up and down the ballot. And so it is really critical that we increase our voice at the ballot box to make sure that our community is heard, our community is represented, and we can begin to address these long-standing inequities and really advance the interests and empower the Latino community in the city of Berkeley. So with that, I'm happy to answer your questions, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much. Beatriz?
So I ran for office mostly as a community member, being very concerned about the disproportionality of Latino students and African American students being suspended, expelled, drop out, our students not being ready for college, much less a career. And there is a very much large group of representatives from both the city, from the school district, from the community, parents who got together and formed a group called United in Action. We were the founders that pushed this for must have been about 4 or 5 years before I got elected, that we pushed the city, we pushed the district to make decisions about our schools that would benefit our students, because it was enough that our students were being tracked. We had long-term English language learners, students who have been in our schools for over 6 years and still were not proficient in English, and much less their own first language. And so we got together, we made our agenda in terms of what needed to happen, that all of our students had to be at third grade reading level, the chronic attendance and truancy of our students had to be improved, the disproportionality of suspension and expulsion of Latino students and African American students, parent engagement that was not present in our school, and welcoming families. And so we made it an agenda that we presented to both our school district and our city council. And it was actually only the city council that approved it at first. And then after pressure from the city council, from the community, that the school district approved the 2020 vision. I became involved because literally in these community groups that we had and meeting with the community, we said, the things are not going to change until we start looking like the board. And so we need to elect somebody. We need to get behind people who are going to run and look like us. And so we looked around the room literally and said, okay, who's going to run next? And I raised my hand along with my fellow partner and friend, Karen Hempel, and we both raised our hand. I said, okay, you run first and I'll follow you. Mostly because our passion was about our students. Our passion was about how can we decrease the incredible expulsion of students. Literally, there was hundreds of students every year being expelled from Berkeley schools and suspended. And knowing full well, I'm a child care director by career, and I have seen many of our children and our families come through our programs and who were still went to bilingual programs and then automatically got tracked into ESL programs. And yet they were proficient in English, and yet they would be put in these classes that had no college credit, that they were not learning and they're not excelling. And not being prepared for college by the time they were in the 11th grade, and much less weren't able to pass the exit exam that was being given. So we ran for office. Fortunately, we both ran and won. And there's where we got to see a bird's eye view, really, of what was going on in our schools. There wasn't any attention to translation of materials. There wasn't any attention to what can we do to help our students who are getting into trouble. How can we circumvent this with support and counseling for our students? What other kinds of programs exist to target especially those students who are getting D's and F's and who are chronically absent? What are we doing to find out what else is going on for these students? How are we tracking and making sure that the students who are have 6 years or more as English language learners, what are we doing to making sure that they are getting the attention they need? We have a master plan for how we serve English language learners. Are we using it? And we weren't. And so it was happening, what was great happening in one classroom, it was not happening in another classroom. By law, all English language learners just have 30 minutes of English language learning that they should be entitled to get. Students were not getting it. They were not getting it at all in our schools. And so were we surprised in terms of the information that we were getting in terms of students still not progressing in their proficiency? Chronic absences and truancy of students. Nobody was checking on these students and finding out why weren't they going to school. So we attacked this in a way that it came out. We did this before the local control accountability plan. We developed our own plan in terms of how we're going to support our students both in making sure that all students are at third grade reading level, approaching that attendance and truancy. And I have to say that the city of Berkeley is one of the few cities in the nation that is really working with their school district in terms of ensuring getting not also supporting and funding or a project of our nurses in our, or funding for mental health. This is a true partnership that we have in terms of still working on the 2020 vision, working on our local control accountability plan that specifically targets that came in 2012 to target African American and Latino students who are foster care and foster youth. So we now have a plan and a tool that we are integrating both with our 2020 vision and with our accountability plan in terms of how we serve our families, how we serve our students. I'm pleased to say that when I first came on the board in 2008, we literally had at least 5 expulsion reports, students to expel in our district. I have now been on the school board, and these last couple of years, this past year, we only expelled 1 student, and that's because it was mandatory through the education board. So that we are not, and our suspension rate has dropped considerably because we brought in restorative justice both in the high school and in the middle school. Our teachers are being trained to do circles so that we can bring both the student who has been a victim and the student who has created harm and how we can heal together and move on from this. And so we've created opportunities to better support our students. We have a master plan that's up to date for how we serve English language learners. We have more closely monitoring of our classrooms. So district-wide, we're seeing how our students are progressing in both their English and also their proficiency. As Jesse noted, we have changing demographics. When I first came to Berkeley, and I'm the child care director here in Berkeley, we always had immigrant families. First generation families coming into Berkeley, raising their children, going to our bilingual child care center, going to the bilingual schools in Berkeley. We've seen the change in demographics. We see less newly immigrant families coming into our city, less children coming in speaking only Spanish. We see more children coming in that are bilingual. We see more children, more families that are multiracial, raising their children to be English speaking, Spanish speaking, Korean, Spanish. This is what we're seeing. So how do our schools adapt to it? We had looked at this over 5 years ago, and we had traditionally had one bilingual program, a bilingual program that serves predominantly native-speaking children, because we have a large population here in Berkeley of native-speaking immigrant families. And then we had a dual language program that was in 3 schools. But because of changing demographics, we weren't able to fill that classroom up with 50%. And so the district made a decision to consolidate all 3 into 1. I opposed it. I was 2 board members that opposed it because I felt that that was going to water down the program and make more families struggle to get into the one dual immersion program and the one bilingual program. And literally it's happened. We see less families, and so that are coming into our bilingual program, and we're not being able to fill 20 slots, 20 positions with students who are native speakers and strong in their Spanish. And so we see less children coming into the district that we can serve. My challenge now as a board member in our district is, what do we do? I don't want to take away the one bilingual program in our district. So we have to find out how we can implement a program that's educational-based, research-based, but also promotes language in our students. That doesn't compete against the dual language program that we have already made a commitment to be successful. Because it's going to be a full school that's going to be dual language from TK all the way to the 5th grade. And then we have middle school that's also bilingual. So many children can go from a bilingual preschool program that's in my program or through the school district that we have one program, or they can continue on to a dual or the bilingual program. So we're challenged by that right now in terms of how our school district can better meet the language needs of our students without watering down the program. We have the affordable housing. That's definitely something that we need to work on both regionally and I think and locally in terms of how we address the families not being able, the same families that have lived here for generations. The parents raised their children and now those children are now adults, and I'm aging myself here, long enough to see them now become parents and want their children in bilingual programs, but can't afford to live in Berkeley. Their parents live here, but they can't afford to live here, buy here, rent here. And so we have a change in population of families wanting to come into Berkeley, live in Berkeley where they know, but not being able to stay. We're fortunate enough to have living wage also coming up and helping families, but one of the things that I see in the world of childcare is how do we have families who now have a living wage, both families are earning $15 an hour. Well, guess what? Now they don't qualify for subsidized care. Now they don't qualify for affordable housing. Fortunately, we've been working for this for 12 years. Alameda County now has a pilot project that instead of cutting off the income at 75% of the state median income, now it's at 85%. 85% of the state median income. So a family of 4 can earn over $5,000 and still qualify for subsidized care. This is something that I've been working on for many years with many of my child care colleagues to change this, but we now need to change the other things that are going to impact our families in our community in terms of being able to qualify for the affordable housing units that perhaps they can get on the list for. Or any other kind of aid. Just because you earn $5,000 gross doesn't mean that you can afford full-time care, which runs $1,500 for a 2-year-old in diapers. So our challenges is ensuring that we have bilingual programs and language programs to serve our children that meet the needs of our families, to support the affordable housing, to ensuring that all the things that we advocate for in our students, in our schools, our libraries, our technology, our parent engagement, and our leadership are also representative of being bilingual, trilingual, and also welcoming families in a way that it feels comfortable and meaningful to them. And definitely to decrease the suspension and the chronic absences and truancy of our students. There's so many different reasons that students don't go to school. It could be a health issue, it could be a mental health issue, it could be bullying, it could be being already behind and knowing and saying, why to go to school? I'm already behind and I don't know. So what do we do to build that bridge for those students? And for those families who sometimes need support to how to support their students. So I'm committed to continue to work to do that, have the lens on as a school board member to serve our families, to serve our children, to serve our youth. It's a great pleasure to see how it can make a difference. I was recently in a classroom where it was a very hard crowd. It was the 4th and 5th graders who actually asked us questions in terms of our election and what are things that you do to make a difference as an elected official. Very different from the League of Women Voters. I think they're a tougher crowd. But it's definitely something is how do we start children to already at a very young age to think about elections. We have as Latinos the youngest population, and the youngest population is going to be voting this year, I think. And so it'll be a really good determinant. I think it's a really good conversation pre and post election in terms of how we voted and how we showed up. Because many of our young people are also informing their parents. How many of you have done this? Take your parents' ballot and say, look, you're going to vote this way. And we inform our parents. And so it's being part of this, being part of this electoral process. It's really something that's inspiring, but I know inspires other people. When we run for office, they say it's possible. So I'd like to thank you and look forward to the questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you both for some really interesting, insightful, thoughtful commentary. As a political scientist, I've thought about some of these things, but you touched upon a lot of really some issues that I've thought about before and studied, but I haven't thought about them recently. So both your comments are really very interesting. Let me make just a couple of quick observations, and then I have a question for you. I mean, I think this kind of interconnection that you've both described between the city government and the school board is something that's not usually recognized and actually not well understood by people out there, because they are separate governmental jurisdictions, but you have common ground, kind of physically speaking, as well as in terms of some of the issues you raised. Now, it's different, of course, because a school board deals with education only or primarily, whereas a city government deals with a different set of issues and an array of issues. And just to point that out, again, something that I think is not always well understood. I mean, one of the in the research that I've seen, some people will say, well, we were contacted by this person about this concern, that concern, but they contacted us, but it's really a matter that the city deals with, and vice versa. And I would imagine part of what you do is refer them in the right direction. You probably have come across those kinds of issues from time to time. But I guess one of the things that struck me, and actually something I've been thinking about myself in terms of some work I'm doing, is that looking at Berkeley as of course a highly educated place, a place that is very wealthy in the aggregate, but where you have a lot of economic and or racial disparity. So how do you, when you're trying to kind of convey your concerns to your fellow members, well, two things. One is when you're trying to create your electoral coalitions, getting elected in the first place, how do you go about creating those coalitions to get you elected? And then how do you go about governing in terms of trying to get coalitions to support and address the concerns that you have? I can readily see that even, quote, liberals would say, oh yeah, we care about this, we care about that. But then if it comes down to, well, spending more on, concerns about health disparities, well, if my children are doing okay, I'm not as concerned, even though, in the abstract, I'm liberal and concerned and so on. But when it comes down to having to make those kind of choices to do one or the other, there are not unlimited resources to do so. So I guess I'd be interested to hear you both comment on that. Again, how do you kind of look at your electoral coalition, your governing coalition, and again, in this larger context of a very wealthy place, but a certain distribution of that wealth that varies across, varies both economically and racially, and oftentimes those two overlap in certain ways. That those who are economically less well off are minority groups, and so on. And that's probably a challenging, I would think, a challenging set of circumstances you face. So I guess whatever your observations, your thoughts are on that, I'd be interested to hear.
For the school district, how this shows up is that Berkeley has, we would call the Berkeley Schools Excellence Project, which funds from Berkeley property tax $25 million into our schools that supports our class size reduction, which we have 20 children from K to 3 and 24 in elementary and then 28 in the high school. It funds that, it funds our libraries, it does counseling, it does all our arts and visual arts programs in our school district. And where it shows up is that our electorate will say to our school district, why are you letting those children from out of district come into our schools and we're supporting them with our taxes? Why don't you build this county where they're at to support what they're coming into? So there becomes a them and us kind of discussion. Well, Berkeley has had to really look at our admissions policy, really look at who's coming into our school district. And many of the students that we have, yes, they've been in our school district for many years, and then the housing, their rent now goes up, and now they can't afford it. But they've been here all the way through middle school, and they have a high schooler, but now they can't afford it, so they move out. Do we say to that family, you can no longer come to school? Well, this is where this family has been invested, and the parent works here. And so we have this back and forth in terms of, refining our policies in terms of admission, making sure that students know that if you're an out-of-district family, that you have to have good grades, you have to have good attendance, and you have to have good behavior, and you can stay in our district. But the majority of families that come into our district are teachers. We're giving permission to our teachers who can't also afford to live in Berkeley to have their children. So this is where we have this push-pull, how can we work it out? We work to refine our policies, and we work to ensure that our students also have a continuum of education and not have to be moved out and displaced and go to another school district when they've been here for many years. We also have the 2x2 where the city council has the mayor and the vice mayor come to a meeting. The superintendent and the president and vice president also come to a meeting, and our city manager comes to the meeting. So where we talk about the things that are impacting both our schools and our city. And this is an opportunity where we talk about, the safety, the crossing guards that you see at a school site, that's funded by our city government. And we had a big concern about not having enough crossing guards. And so this is where we talk about how that happens. Or we have our safety officers that are also police officers. How do we work with them in communities? So there are many ways that I don't know other cities, but I think Berkeley is pretty unique in terms of how we reach out to each other as a school district and as a city. I think it's really important to have that ongoing open communication when things happen. We can talk to each other and not say it's a surprise or anything, but it's certainly we have to figure this out.
Yeah, and on that point, Berkeley has millions of dollars that we allocate every budget cycle for. We have child care mitigation funding that we allocate. We have money through our general fund to support homeless programs, health programs, recreation programs, services for youth and families. And because of the 2020 initiative and the city's commitment to really help ensure our success towards the outcomes of the 2020 initiative, we have built into our budget process for how we allocate that funding an alignment, really looking at how programs align with the goals for the 2020 vision. And that's something that's recently happened, and I think is important to make sure that we are spending our taxpayer dollars to really help realize this important initiative to reduce the achievement gap in our schools. So that's an example where there is an opportunity for the city to really help strengthen the work that's being done in the school district through our tax dollars and how we allocate our tax dollars to support the various initiatives in our schools, whether it's our school crossing guards or our health clinics in our schools or a variety of different initiatives. Well, as you had said, Berkeley is a very, even though geographically it's not a very big city, it is very dense and it's very diverse and is very segregated actually. And so how do you build an electoral coalition to unite the various disparate groups and neighborhoods and interests in the city of Berkeley? It's challenging. It's certainly challenging. I'm doing that right now.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I think where the opportunity arises is around issues and issues that really are important to people throughout the city. And I think equity is a real concern on the part of everyone in the community, whether you have a $5 million house in the Berkeley Hills or you live in the Flatlands. I think people in Berkeley move to Berkeley because of its history, its identity, its commitment to equity and inclusiveness and justice. And I think people are seeing a lot, as we discussed, a lot of very significant changes happening in our population, and are very concerned about issues of equity in our community. And so I think, whether it's equity in terms of housing, equity in terms of health, equity in terms of jobs, equity in terms of academic success. I think that's one example of an issue that really cuts across city lines and is a foundation to bring people together. Certainly on the council, we have district elections. So the mayor is elected citywide, and the city council members are elected by districts. And so we have 8 city council districts throughout Berkeley. And while, did you have a question?
Oh, I'm just gonna wait.
Oh, okay. And so while the, we all represent the entire city, and we have to look at citywide issues, because we represent districts, we are sort of very focused on the needs and concerns of our different geographic areas. And at times that's challenging because it's challenging to get somebody, say, who represents the Northeast Berkeley Hills to care a whole lot about shootings in West Berkeley or about health disparities in South and West Berkeley. But I do think we have as a council been able to come together and to address citywide issues. And so, because we represent districts, it's, because we have 9 members of the council, it takes 5 votes to get anything done in the city council. So you have to build coalitions across different political factions and geographic lines to be able to get support to move policies and programs forward. And that's what I've done. That's what many of us in the council have done. And so it's one thing to get elected, then it's another thing to actually to do the coalition building and to work with staff and work with your fellow colleagues to get the political support to move these initiatives forward. And then once you get a vote done, then you got to work within the administration to help shepherd a policy to implementation, which is another year or 2 to get something done. So, I think in Berkeley, because we are such a diverse city, it's important, I think, for elected officials to, as candidates, to talk about issues and have a platform of policy goals and to try to find ways to bridge the divides and unite our city around a vision, a set of policy goals for the future of our city. And that's how you build that electoral coalition, and then work with your colleagues on the school board or city council to get that done. It is certainly challenging. Berkeley, everyone has an opinion, and certainly on the city council that's the case as well. But I think we are all committed on the council to really what's best for our city, and we've been able to work together. At times it's been difficult, but we've been able to work effectively to really address some of the bigger issues that are facing our city. And even though people in North Berkeley may not be experiencing the same struggles as people in South Berkeley, I think everyone's committed to equity. Everyone's committed to racial and economic justice.
Yeah, I mean, part of my, just a quick 2-finger thing on that is that, to me, what's interesting is that how they define equity, what constitutes equity, and then how do you actually achieve that? And one of the questions, again, I would just mention it now, and maybe we can come back to it later because I know there's some other hands up here. But you were talking about creating the coalitions on issues, and one of my questions that interest me is to what extent those coalitions carry across a set of issues, or is it an issue by issue thing, and what kinds of issues? But that's something we can hold in advance because that's, we have a question back here.
I wanted to go there because I think it's important that the students especially know that Latino voice and Latino influence in different municipalities in California is different. And so having been born in Fresno, that's actually now majority Democrat, that might be surprising to you all. And worked in LA for 20 years on Black, Brown, Asian coalitions with progressive whites, I know how special Berkeley is. And I want you all to talk a little bit more, dig into this point, because I want the students to understand that it's not just that you're Latino, it's that you're willing to contend with defining what does it look like to govern with equity values. And that's different than just getting elected. And I think it's important for health students especially to know you can learn the tools of the trade to get yourself elected to do precinct work, But governing and making your city equitable is a lot more than that. I hope you all will just touch more on what was just put on the table.
Yeah, when I earlier explained in terms of the 2020 vision and the United in Action group, we looked at all the positions and said we're going to slowly fill in all the positions to be board members that are looking at equity in our schools and addressing the achievement gap of our African American life. We specifically looked at that. And everybody except for one board member was from part of the original United in Action group. And so we were intentional about how we were going to do that. And so I have to say that even the new board member that's on board, though he isn't, we all looked through the lens of, is this just? And where are our African American students? Where are Latino students? What are we doing to address this? And so I think that for us, that's what really worked and made the difference in terms of, in some times you can control it, but it's an action that a community group came together to really see that's only going to change when we make the difference and we get up there and run for office. And so for us, I don't know what's going to happen in 2020 in terms of the next elections, but we definitely need to look at in terms of who we mentor to come into the next place and be in positions of leadership in our schools, being leaderships in commissions, on committees. We really need to inspire and motivate more people to take our place and take a place at the table, because those seats can't be empty. They have to be there. And so for me, it's about community groups coming together to really saying, if it's not speaking to you, then it's time to be part of the conversation.
Yeah, and just on Beatriz's point, before Karen was elected, for many, many years there was, it's my understanding, just understanding the history of issues around racial and equity issues in the schools. There's a lot of discussion, a lot of effort on the part of people in the community, but the composition of the school board did not necessarily think it was a real significant priority for the district. And then you have issues where parents of kids who live in the Berkeley Hills are very defensive of allocating resources away from their kids towards addressing the needs of Black and brown kids, and that's where that tension existed. And it's taken a lot of work on the part of Beatriz and other people in the school board to really shift the focus of the district to really have an equity lens. I agree with what you said. I think as elected officials, I see myself as sort of as a community advocate. And so a lot of the issues that come to the city come from people in the community. The minimum wage, for example. It was an actual coalition of people in the Berkeley community in the East Bay that said Berkeley needs to adopt its own minimum wage. And so we worked with them to bring to the city council a minimum wage ordinance, and that was really the catalyst that led to the city council adopting its local minimum wage. I do have to say, I think, from my perspective, on issues around economic justice, there's a disconnect between what people see Berkeley as and what Berkeley is. And as we talked about, there's some major disparities on the basis of economic opportunity, housing access, on the basis of race, on the basis of economic class. And as I said, we really have two Berkeleys. And so while we have been doing some work, certainly the 2020 vision is an incredible effort in the area of housing, for example, or even for the minimum wage. It has been a challenge to get real, effective progressive action to address those issues. And oftentimes, especially in the city council, you're going against the economic interests, the builders and the Chamber of Commerce and interest groups that want to protect their profits versus what's good for the city as a whole. And that is oftentimes a conflict that we see at the city council. And from my perspective, I think Berkeley has historically been a progressive leader. We have been at the cutting edge on many, many different initiatives, but we are no longer a progressive leader. And the fact that it was a long, painful process for Berkeley to adopt a pathway to $15 an hour for the minimum wage, I think, is an example of we are not as progressive as people think we are. And that the influence of the Chamber of Commerce and the business community was so significant that it did stand in the way of us repeatedly being able to move that initiative forward. So that's frustrating for me as somebody who cares deeply about, I mean, my background is I have been a political activist my entire life. I, at a very young age, was deeply committed to fighting for social justice. And so I come to public office from the perspective of what needs to be done to make things better for people, what needs to be done to level the playing field for people in the community. And when good things that really can make a difference are obstructed because of political or economic interests, it's very frustrating. But, you know, that's where it really takes a coalition of elected officials and community to put the pressure and to use the bully pulpit to get our elected leaders to take effective progressive action. And part of my job is not just policymaker, but also community organizer, helping build those coalitions in the community, turning people out to city council meetings, getting them to write letters, getting them to speak, so that we can build the public pressure and the momentum to be able to get things done. And that helps build electoral coalitions as well. I mean, certainly right now housing is the big issue in Berkeley. It's the issue I hear throughout the entire city. And I think, you know, it is an issue that is really at the top of people's minds and is really not only is a concern of people, but also is something that really is motivating people to get involved in this election. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a question kind of to the last point you just made about housing. And, you know, we talked a lot about inequities in Berkeley. And I think, I mean, you probably know this best, that one of the largest drivers of that is housing costs, you know. And so, yeah, I mean, maybe you partly already answered this, but like, what do you see as a solution there that's not, you know, maybe affordable housing? Because, you know, we may have a few affordable housing developments come up, but that's not really going to solve the problem, in my opinion. I don't know. So,
well, I think there are several challenges. One is, one of the biggest reasons why, well, there's two reasons why rents are so high in Berkeley and statewide. Is one, we do not have enough housing to accommodate the need of people in the Bay Area and throughout the state of California. And that's just a situation we are in, and we cannot correct it as quick enough to address the crisis, the displacement crisis that we're in. The other challenge is the state of California 20 years ago passed the Costa-Hawkins Act, which allows landlords to, whenever a tenant moves out, to adjust the rent to whatever the market will bear. And so in Berkeley, from 1996, when Costa-Hawkins was first implemented, to now, I mean, there was, you know, rents, I think the median rent was $700 for an apartment. Now it's, you know, roughly $2,500. So we saw rents increase dramatically over the last 15, 20 years in the city of Berkeley as a result of this policy, and they continue to increase. So one thing I think needs to be done is at the state level, Berkeley needs to work with other rent control jurisdictions and the legislature to modify Costa-Hawkins or even repeal it so that we can have some control of housing costs throughout the state of California. That's a big fix that can make a big difference. But as you noted, we're in a housing and displacement crisis right now. We're not going to be able to build enough affordable housing quick enough to stem the displacement and gentrification that's happening in Berkeley right now. But that does not mean that we shouldn't I think, accelerate the efforts that Berkeley and other communities are doing to create affordable housing. And so there are a number of ways we can do that. One is, Berkeley has had rent control since 1980, and it is, for people that live in rent-controlled housing, helps keep housing costs stable. So we need to keep rent control in place. We also need to, while we do need to build more housing, we need to leverage new construction to increase the number of affordable units. And I was the person on the city council that offered our affordable housing mitigation fee, which has resulted in millions of dollars coming to the city of Berkeley and hopefully hundreds of housing units being built as new market rate construction is being developed in the city of Berkeley. We need to look at our inclusion measure on the ballot, Measure U1. You probably got a whole bunch of mail about no on U1 and yes on DD. Don't be fooled. The people that are paying for that are the big big landlords that don't want to pay their fair share. Measure U1 is something that I actually helped develop. Would generate about $3.5 million on an annual basis for Berkeley to create more affordable housing. The biggest challenge that we have as a community is we do not have enough money to create housing that's affordable for low and middle income families in Berkeley. And so things like Measure U1, things like Measure A1, the county housing bond, will really help Berkeley and cities in Alameda County be able to do more to create affordable housing. And then we need to keep people in their homes. You know, there's a huge amount of evictions that are happening in Berkeley. Measure, AA is a Berkeley measure that would prevent the eviction of families for owner move-in evictions during the academic year. And we actually are seeing a spike in owner move-in evictions in Berkeley, as well as other speculative evictions in Berkeley, because Berkeley is one of the hottest real estate markets in the entire country. There's so many people who want to live in Berkeley. And so if you've lived in your apartment for 30 years and you're paying a $600 a month rent, there's enormous pressure on the part of your landlord to find a way to get you out. And David could probably talk about this because he's been working on these issues. We are seeing a lot of speculative evictions, a lot of displacement of families in the Berkeley community. And so we need to strengthen our eviction protections to make sure that people are not priced out. So I think there are a number of things that we need to do. And Berkeley certainly is doing a lot in the area of creating affordable housing, but if we really want to help stem the displacement crisis and really preserve our diversity, it's really going to take a real leadership on the part of our city government to really address this issue. And I was saying, do you want to add?
No, I think it's, I think the level for education and our families, it's keeping families. Many of the families, I live in West Berkeley, and West Berkeley traditionally was more Latino, African American, used to work in the naval shipyards, and we have houses that are in West Berkeley in the flats that are selling for $1 million, and these are like 2-bedroom bungalows. These houses used to go for $150,000 back in 1990. They would go. So the pressure is on, and that's why the change in demographics is happening for families. I see a lot of new families coming into the district with little babies, and so I see our schools changing. And I see a lot of teachers who want to work in Berkeley, love Berkeley, but can't afford to live in Berkeley. And so I think with their solutions, I think Tony Thurman has brought something that's brought forth, and I think San Francisco has just passed something in terms of working with school districts to create more affordable housing for teachers. And so I think not just our teachers, but also our classified, because we have a lot of important people who are traditionally and mostly of color, our custodians, our gardeners, our cooks, our nutrition, who also want to live in Berkeley also. So, what we can do might happen locally, but also we need to look at how can we work on it as a regional level in our county or Contra Costa County also. Because I think, it's not getting better at all. It's getting actually more worse. And when you see the travel time the families also are spending, in terms of commuting from one school to another, it's putting more pressure on families and putting more pressure on children. So we're not surprised that we're not seeing more parents in our schools because they're totally burnt out from the commute and travel time. Easily you can see the travel time just going from one side of the city to the other side of the city here in Berkeley.
Yeah.
So I wanted to comment, and maybe it's more of a comment rather than a question, but Berkeley is in this incredible position in the city to have a large campus, public university, right, that is in the city, that it is producing some of the most incredible, intelligent citizens, and the work that they do. We have teacher training programs, right? A lot of human capacity, a lot of intellectual capacity. But we also have a population that doesn't stay, right? Because the training is for a short period of time. For undergraduate students, our graduate students stay longer, than a good couple here. But yeah, it's a very good thing, right? That we have such a staggered, if you will, kind of population. So that to me, I wonder, what is the, in your plans, in your agendas for the city, what have been some of the most pressing issues in terms of like working with the university? And whether it's like, our leadership, but also our students and faculty, right? So what have been some of the issues that have been both like the, really positive impacts, but also potentially ways that, you could imagine a better relationship between the proverbial town and gown?
Interesting. Well, I definitely think that there could be, it's taken me a long time to develop a relationship as a community agency of a nonprofit director to reach out to the university, and there's more of you than me, and so it's a lot of work to make sure that and build those relationships with people that I can know in the School of Education, in the Haas School of Business. I learned about the different groups that can possibly help us, but it's taken me a long time, and not a lot of nonprofit directors in our city actually reach out to the university. But also building pathways for our students. How do we ensure that a population of our students, our low-income, our middle-income families in Berkeley actually get to go to Berkeley? And I don't have the numbers, I don't know if you ever reported to the city in terms of University of Cal Berkeley accepted X amount of students from Berkeley. It would be nice to know how many of our students actually get into that pathway. I've known some students, but I've also known students who have not been accepted, and they're right here in this neighborhood. So how that, that kind of information gets passed to us, both on the undergraduate and the graduate level. How do our Berkeley students actually get to benefit from being in a city that has a university? How do our teachers also get to access the resources here at the university? How are nonprofits who are supported by our city funding, how they are also through research can help us with research, can help us in finding grants, can help us finding the sources that can support our nonprofit organizations and the missions that we have. I mean, it's true. It's how many graduate students are looking for a project to work on, and we're over here that have tremendous amount of projects that we would benefit from and that would help our organization. So I think there's got to be a stronger connection, but I also understand, we have a great person who from the Chancellor's office who works on the funding the community grants that are given. But that's almost like their piece, that we're doing our piece by funding these programs, but those are programs of partnerships. I think there could be other kinds of ways that we can, the faculty can be inspired to reach out to the community. Many times there's many students, we have tutors through the Build program, the tutors that come out to our schools, come out to our community groups, that is also funded by our city. And that's where we get to know a whole group of students. And for us, as a Latino organization, that's where a lot of Latinos get to know, oh, there are Latinos in Berkeley. Because you circulate here at university and you don't know where the Latino stores are or where the Latino bakeries are, and you know that once you go past San Pablo. So it's a really nice way, and it would be a nice part of the welcome that a lot of our students can receive, Berkeley students can receive, and say, this is the community you come to. Not just the university, but there's also other places in our city that would also welcome you.
Yeah, on that, I completely agree. I think there's a lot of opportunity for more collaboration between the city and the university. Whether it's with the outreach that our health department's doing to different communities in Berkeley, whether it's with our school social welfare. Berkeley, actually, just one example, we used to have so Berkeley has a growing homeless population, as the whole region. And one of the challenges we're facing with our homeless population is the real lack of effective mental health services. Due to the many, many decades of cuts, and most recently the cuts in the Great Recession. And so Berkeley used to have a partnership with the school with a variety of departments on Berkeley campus where we had interns who help the city in doing direct outreach to people on our streets. And that's one way in which maybe with partnerships with various departments and students can help implement some of the city's programs and initiatives. An incredible amount of research is being done on climate change, on a variety of areas that would really benefit the city and its environmental initiatives, its our work on economic development and land use planning. And once again, there's an opportunity for partnerships and for benefiting from that research. So while that's an area where I think there's room for improvement, historically I think our relationship with the university has been somewhat tenuous, and
What is the largest landlord?
and it is the biggest property owner in Berkeley. And I think a challenge, a mutual challenge that we face is there are thousands and thousands of students in Berkeley that cannot find an affordable place to live. And the student housing crisis is not just an issue that affects the university, it affects the city. And we are very concerned about, first of all, the growing number of student homelessness in Berkeley, which is shocking, let alone the difficulty of students to find an affordable place to live in Berkeley, and people moving as far as Richmond, Oakland, other East Bay communities to be able to go to school here. And an affordable housing is just as critical as, it's critical, it's central to an affordable education. And so the new chancellor, whoever that will be, and the new mayor will be in a unique position to be able to really work to advance the construction of student housing close to campus. And whether it's through private development, whether it's through university projects, we really need to do more to really increase housing for our students. It is a big challenge that a lot of people in Berkeley are concerned about, because it has a ripple effect on our entire housing market in Berkeley. So that's one challenge, mutual challenge that we face as a community as well.